So without further ado, I will turn things over to Johan to kick things off. Go ahead, Johan.
Right, thank you very much for that, and welcome everyone to this important event when myself and my colleagues here at A4E has the opportunity to lay out what we now believe is so important as we are now into clearly the recovery phase on how we can reopen travel in a safe way. But let me start by pointing out some of the facts about the current situation of European airlines. The European sector is the most reliant on international traffic globally. So we've been the hardest hit by a lack of coordination on travel restrictions. Our sector makes up almost half of the airline losses globally and way more than both Asia and North America. Now is the time for Europe to take advantage of its vaccination rates and to safely start to fully reopen travel. But we need the member states to put a coordinated framework in place. But on top of the impact of travel restrictions, we also face the absurd situation of a huge monopoly imposed increases in ATC costs. And this is because Europe is requiring us to ensure that ATC providers don't make a loss, despite the picture that I've showed you above, and because they only reduce their cost by circa 1% despite the collapse in flights. Now, amazingly, these monopoly air navigation service providers are being allowed to pass on 5.4 billion euros to airlines and to our customers from 2023. This will undermine the recovery and it will hit our customers, and we must focus going forward on how the airline sector can recover and how we can be put in a position to be able to also invest into the future. Now, we are ready and we are able to deliver safe travel and reconnect European citizens, and we want to play our role in that recovery. Vaccination rates across Europe are increasing, with over 40% of adults already having one dose, and that is increasing rapidly, and about 20% are now fully vaccinated. This is performing the critical function of breaking the link between cases and hospitalization. We know that people are longing to travel and to be reunited with friends and with families they haven't seen for such a long time. And by supporting travelers and tourism throughout Europe, which represented approximately 9% of EU GDP in 2019, airlines can help lead the Europe's economic recovery from the crisis. But we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of the objective, safe travel without restrictions. The EU digital COVID certificate is really helpful step to do this for this summer, and we now need the governments to make sure that this is implemented and that it works. But we cannot make, and I repeat this, we cannot make this the new normal. The science is clear that unrestricted safe travel is possible for many intra-EU flights already, and this will only increase as the vaccination program rolls out. And we already seen some countries, such as the Netherlands as an example, to remove all restrictions from travelers from low-risk countries. So we all have a responsibility, including the European governments and the Commission, to ensure that we do not move European travel back to a world of restrictions and unnecessary paperwork. Tests and certificates cannot be here for the long term.
Thanks very much, Johan. Michael, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Johan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk to you briefly on how the need to restore restriction-free travel as soon as possible this summer. Research has already shown that the risk of catching the COVID virus on an aircraft remains extraordinarily low. Added to that is the fact that 70% of the EU population is on track to have received at least their first dose vaccine by the end of June. In fact, in Ireland this morning, we announced that we expect to have 70% of the entire population fully vaccinated, double dose vaccinated by the end of July. So the vaccines are flooding out across the continent. With the majority of EU citizens expected to be fully vaccinated by midsummer, member states must now begin lifting all the remaining restrictions on air travellers, particularly on intra-EU air travel, now that it is safe to do so. As Johan has said, we welcome the developments by both the Netherlands and Spain, who've already lifted all restrictions given the improved epidemiological situation, but more countries need to catch up with that programme. Freedom of movement within Europe is essential for a prosperous and united Europe. It's been the cornerstone of one of the great cornerstones of the success of the European Union, has been the free movement of our people across borders. Yet during the COVID pandemic, borders have been shut down, usually unilaterally, in breach of that freedom of movement principle. Therefore, all of the members of A4E are calling for Schengen to be re-established, not just for aviation, but for all other modes of transport. We want and we need to see a gradual reopening of non-essential international travel to and from the EU generally, not just within the EU, but also to and from the EU. And a good starting point would be to start with restoring travel links between the EU and the USA, where vaccination rollout has been equally successful, with 70-80% of the population now vaccinated and vaccines available on demand across the USA. The airlines have done our part. Air travel remains the safest mode of transport, and vaccinations now allow us immediately, certainly no later than the 1st of July, to remove all restrictions on inter-EU air travel. We've reinstated connectivity to respond. The airlines are reinstating that connectivity to respond to pent-up demand from consumers. We're implementing and will continue to maintain very stringent health safety protocols on board our aircraft for the remainder of this summer. But it is up to the member states to come together and make affordable, restriction-free air travel possible again within Europe this summer, and as soon as possible, restore restriction-free travel between Europe and the United States of America. And with that, I'll hand you over. I think Carsten is next.
So thanks very much, Michael. Actually, Ben is next. Ben, the floor is yours. Ben, I think you need to put your unmute yourself. Okay, we'll stand by for just 1 minute. It wouldn't be a Zoom session without a technical glitch, right?
Yes, maybe we pass on to Carsten and come back to Ben. We keep it.
Sounds like a great idea. Carsten, the floor is yours.
So once again, Michael was right after all. You're always one step ahead, Michael. It's amazing. Well, welcome everybody. I join my colleagues in thanking you for your time today. And indeed, the biggest crisis this industry has ever seen and hopefully ever will have seen. But there's also some good news in this crisis. And that good news is that we are committing and are continuing to commit to our sustainability goals, which we have laid out before. And these commitments stand and will survive this crisis. And whatever the recovery will take, we are committed to come out as an industry to be cleaner and smarter after the pandemic than we were when we entered it. At times before, we were able to commit up to 170 billion euros of investments on sustainability until 2030. And I'm glad to announce on behalf of all of us, this is a commitment which stands, that investments are there to stay. And this sector we are all representing here is not just committed to climate protection more than ever, but we also have given ourselves a clear roadmap, Destination 2050, which does lay down our ambitious commitments. It shows that by 2030, we will be able to have our emissions, and by 2050, we will be net zero CO2 industry. And there's a clear plan, and I think there's a clear opportunity for us as an industry, but also combined with the efforts of politicians and the regulatory bodies to achieve this green transformation. I think with this Destination 2050, the European industry also has sent a very clear signal to the rest of the world that transition in our industry is achievable and actually is on the way. And that is maybe my most important message to you today, that of course, for us in Europe to be able to invest these billions of euros, we must be a competitive industry. And therefore supporting regulatory and elements, but also long-term political frameworks will be essential if we want to make this happen. And for that, we will need joint industry activities and government activities, and even beyond Europe, some global coordination, for example, with ICAO. Because it is key that these efforts of us are not distorting competition more than it already has, or in a way that what we do will eventually help others who do less to be more competitive, those outside of Europe. I think that would be awkward. This is something we couldn't accept and we wouldn't be willing to do. So it's very important that the level playing field is achieved or maintained where it already exists. Secondly, that governments support industry investments, be it in fleet renewal or be it in sustainable aviation fuels, where it just cannot be done by the industry alone. And third, that governments and regulatory bodies also stimulate further investments in new technologies, in innovation, be it again sustainable aviation fuel, where a lot has to be done, be it zero carbon aircraft, where by founding research programs we eventually want to get there jointly, or be it other examples of public-private partnerships. And last but not least, I think it's key, as mentioned also by my colleagues before, that the EU especially stays clear of so-called fixes, which in the end are just additional burdens. For example, taxations, which just make it even more difficult for us to achieve our goals and will not help any of us in the industry, will not help any European citizen, and surely will not help the climate, because those investments will be lacking to actually be done on behalf of the environment. And therefore, I think it's important, again, politicians focus on helping us to meet our decarbonization goals, financial, regulatory support, sustainable aviation fuels, investments in modern aircraft. That's our joint task. We are all committed to do this. We want this to be done. We are convinced it can be done. So let's do it, but it can only be done together. With that, I hand back to Jennifer. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Carsten. Just a reminder to any journalists writing questions in the Slido, just indicate who your question is for, or if it's not for anyone in particular, then you can leave that out. But it certainly helps if we know who specifically you're interested in a response from. We'll try to go back to Ben. Ben, the floor would be yours now if we have you.
Jennifer, do you want me to do his slides or should we just wait for Ben and see if he can come on?
I think we're gonna try to get him online now.
Okay, let's continue then.
No, he says no. So we'll actually, Johan, maybe you can slide because I don't seem to.
Okay, we can just get the slides on the screen.
Perfect, thanks.
So basically, we also are calling out for now that, fundamentally we need to get action and progress on how we now can look at reformation of the EU 261. I mean, this has been debated for such a long time, and the problem with this regulation is, of course, that it's very, very poorly worded, and it's very unclear when it comes to the issues such as what actually constitutes an extraordinary event, and also then the issues around the compensation. And I just want to draw note on the fact that I think I can be very proud of the members of this group who have from day one absolutely been very clear in the intention to try to live up with the regulations and the pressure that we have been on to. But, we were never set up, and the regulations didn't assume anything that is is anything close to what we have experienced as part of the mass cancellations that we saw. More than 10 billion euros by the members has been paid out in the refunds. And we have also, on top of that, I should add, we've had it, all European airlines have included and also then introduced some of the most generous policies that you would have seen around the ability to cancel, the ability also to move flights without any charges and fees in order to do that. But we need to make sure now that we do get a reformation of this EU 261, that everybody agrees that it's not fit for purpose, and this now just needs to be taking place. So if I can move on to the next slide.
Actually, there was just one slide there. So
excellent.
Thank you very much, and we'll see when Ben is back online later if he has something else he'd like to add for sure. But maybe thanks for stepping in there, Johan. Maybe we can go and move to Luis, who follows on from the slide that Carsten had presented on the green transformation. Luis, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Airlines, we are determined to be part of the climate change solution. Aviation is responsible for 2.4% of global emissions. And unlike other industries, airlines do not have an immediate alternative to fossil fuels, but our Destinations 2050 roadmap provides robust evidence on how we are reducing our carbon footprint. New technologies, improved operations, sustainable aviation fuels, and smart economic measures such as the EU ETS and CORSIA are all required to achieve net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Progressing the development and commercial deployment of sustainable aviation fuel is crucial to decarbonizing aviation. But we cannot do this alone. Governments must put into place supportive policies to attract the necessary investment to construct sustainable aviation fuel plants that will deliver enough supply for the airline industry, creating highly valued green jobs and economic growth at global scale. Governments must provide access to finance, loans, and grants to help scale up SAF production. Such support will put higher SAF targets within reach and make them achievable earlier. SAFs currently account for less than 0.1% of aviation fuel consumption. Even a move towards a 1-2% SAF blending mandate in Europe by 2025 represents a huge challenge. But with the right policies in place, over the next 9 years, 30 sustainable aviation fuel plants could be built across Europe, enabling annual CO2 emissions to be cut by 20 million tons by 2030. We believe that a carefully designed SAF mandate policy will help attract the necessary investment to construct dedicated SAF plants in Europe. In addition, we call on ICAO to support a global ambition for SAF to support investment in plants around the world.
Thanks very much, Luis. And I will now turn things over to Thomas. Thomas, the floor is yours. Do we have Thomas? Looks like we may be missing Thomas. Johan, I might need you to step back in again. Just give us a second here.
I think the audience would have thought that we made this up because this is how these things work, It's just the point we're trying to make. But if Thomas isn't there, the next point on the agenda was that to start. Just go ahead with the Q&A, or.
So actually, I don't see Thomas on the screen, but in fact,
in European Sky.
I can do Thomas's slide, but I think it's pretty much a topic that's known to this entire group. It seems that we've lost Thomas, so we can possibly come back to that during the Q&A. We'll send a copy of all of the slides to everyone after the event, so you'll have a copy of everything that was said here.
I'm back on, Jennifer, if you like.
Okay, wonderful, Thomas. Thanks. Well, we can put this.
And maybe Jennifer, I'll test. Can you hear me now?
And we got Ben as well, so we're all good now. We can start the press conference. Wonderful.
Hey, Jennifer. Sorry, this just demonstrates why business travel will return very rapidly in Europe, where even the airlines can't organise a bloody Zoom call between ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. So maybe we can put Thomas's slide back up on the screen, and then I'll give the floor over to Ben to pick up on any points he wanted to add to Johan's presentation on 261. But first, Thomas, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. First of all, I think the current crisis is a good opportunity for us, for both the industry and the politicians, to join forces and to build aviation back better. It is an expression we've been hearing in Brussels and in Europe a lot, building back better. But it's indeed a great opportunity. It begins actually, what my slide is about, it begins with an updated Single European Sky regulation, which is, again, very hot news. Last week's Council agreement in Brussels will support the sector's climate ambitions, as more efficient operations and also air traffic management are indeed the starting point for a wider decarbonization of air transport. However, we see now that national egoisms, sovereignty and military concerns have gotten in the way the last couple of years and actually have prevented a coordinated and harmonized and effective implementation of the Single European Sky. Basically, what this means is that airspace efficiency and the resulting environment benefits it would bring have been put on hold for years, what actually could be done today. To go back to the Council agreement from last week, it actually shows that the state sovereignty concerns continue. They continue to plague any real reform of the CES regulation. For instance, the states have removed the European Commission's very good intentions and proposal for the creation of a pan-European economic regulator, opting instead to keep both economic and performance functions of their own NSPs at national level. That's what the member states did, or actually are proposing now. It actually means now that as owners of the NSPs, the member states will continue to be the ones deciding on target levels and the revenues they would like to achieve or obtain. I think there's a clear conflict of interest here. The airlines don't have an issue with sovereignty as such, but we see how it continues to impede progress on this file. And we urge, therefore, the member states to look forward instead of looking backwards and to pursue innovative solutions that already exist, by the way, in other industries, for instance, in telecommunications sector. So A4E continues to call on the Council, again, the European Parliament and the Commission to put these national interests aside and adopt a more ambitious reform of the CES regulation that's in all of our common interests, that is of both the sector and the European citizens. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Thomas. And if we have Ben now, I'd like to maybe give the floor to you, Ben, to add any additional points you wanted to add on the need for 261 reform. Ben.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. And for those of you watching, this was not staged, even though we would love to show how difficult it is to have meetings via Zoom. And we do want you back in the air. Look, I'll just add a few extra points to what's already been said. So it's clear, I think all of you know, we're in the customer service business. And when we look at 261, customer service is obviously top of mind. So even before the crisis, this rule, this law already had a lot of shortcomings. The crisis has obviously brought a lot of those shortcomings to light, and the requirement to evolve EU 261 needs to take place. So this is it's very important to all A4E airlines that we move along to evolve this law to something that is more realistic and more balanced within our industry. So here again, this law is very punitive. It is probably one of the most punitive protection rights laws in the world. It already, it does add over and above the other imbalances that we have in place here. We've got special taxes, we have charges, we have unique remedies, we've got employee rights, approach to decarbonization. So one other element over and above all the other imbalances we have with many of the other jurisdictions. It's really important that 261 does evolve. And then I guess the last point I want to make is we did have, as everyone knows, an impossible 14 months, 15 months since the beginning of this crisis. And 261 to go back and hit us in a punitive way, it's something we have to avoid.
Thanks very much, Ben. I'm glad we could bring you back online. And we do have a lot of questions in the Slido for our CEO, so we'll get right to it. The first question is from Sid Phillip at Bloomberg. And his question is, given that cases have begun rising again in the UK, do you worry that a reopening might be quickly shut down? And what is your plan B if lockdowns should return? Maybe Johan, you can take this question.
Well, I don't think it's a surprise that the cases are rising. The government has said that as they were opening up the domestic economy, that you were going to see rising cases. The most important thing is to determine whether actually the vaccination works. And it seems like that it's still very, very effective, particularly if you have a double shot of the vaccination. And because of the rollout and how that is now accelerating now, I think it's a fair thing to say that you could definitely go ahead with looking at this framework and opening up safe travel. But the important thing is also that the government are looking at data. And the governments in the UK has not done that. If you're seeing about some of the way on how it's been made up as they go along, that brings huge confusion for travelers. It makes it impossible for us as operators to also plan. So the important thing is that there's a transparency around the decision making, and when you're doing so, we can plan and customers can plan as well. And that's why I'm so delighted to see now that hopefully the ambassadors will now endorse the proposition on how to restart travel in a safe way. So I think we're on a good path outside the UK, but as we speak right now, UK is actually isolating itself from the rest of the world, not backed out by any reliance of science and data to say that is in any way the right thing to do.
And I think it's important, Johan, just to add to that, while case numbers are rising in the UK, serious illnesses, hospitalizations and morbidity aren't. They remain at record low levels. And that's the effect of the vaccines. Yes, there is a rise in cases as there is more social interaction, particularly and that rise in cases seems to be related to people who have thus far refused to take the vaccine. But it's not putting pressure on the health services. It's not really resulting in a big spike in serious illnesses. And that's the effect of the vaccines. We know now across Europe, 70-80% of the population will be vaccinated either by the end of June or by the end of July. Now is the time to remove those restrictions on intra-EU air travel, and also to look at opening up lanes between the USA and the EU, where both the EU and the USA will have very high rates of vaccination and therefore protection against these variants by the end of June or by the end of July.
Thanks very much, Michael. Following up on this point, Itika de Jong from the Netherlands asks about the fact that we've been calling for harmonization on travel restrictions since the beginning of the crisis. And do we believe that this will now happen? And do we have a plan B? So it isn't happening. It hasn't happened thus far. Do we have a plan B? Michael, maybe we can start with you.
I was going to offer to Ben, since the query came from, it's not happening yet. We are, certainly in Ryanair, we support the EU Green Cert. We're impressed with the fact that a lot of EU countries, the Belgians, the Dutch, the Poles, have started to issue the digital cert, particularly for vaccinated passengers. But there are outliers. Ireland, which has performed disgracefully into the recovery. We have nearly 70% of our population vaccinated, and yet we're still we're preventing vaccinated Irish passengers traveling to Europe without obtaining a negative PCR on the way back. We had the shambles in the UK last week of opening up to Portugal, putting Portugal on the green list at a time when Portugal had lower COVID case rates than the UK, and then taking them off the green list, putting them on the amber list. And Malta, which has higher rates of vaccination than the UK and has lower COVID rates, can't get from the amber list to the green list. So it's a complete muddle. We need a date. We would strongly advocate for 1 July, where, and that seems to be the EU lead, is everybody would accept the digital service. Certainly for vaccinated passengers, it will be a little bit more complicated to get people on that system who have either suffered from COVID and are therefore immune for 9 months, or people who have had a negative PCR test. But for vaccinated passengers, there is simply no argument, there's no medical basis for preventing them from travelling freely within the EU or between the UK and the EU and from the 1st of July. Ben, I don't know whether you want to add to that since the query came from the Netherlands?
No, sure. And, we've had since yesterday, since these new rules have come in place in France, there's an app already in place here, anti-COVID, which you can confirm that you have been vaccinated. It's very easy to use, and we're hoping that this will be recognized by July 1st, as you just suggested, Michael. And it's a very quick and easy way to verify that someone's been vaccinated and enable free and easier travel throughout the world. You can now get into France if you have been vaccinated and you have proof of the vaccine without any issue. But I experienced that myself twice over the last 2 days. As another example of something that's not air travel, I went to Roland Garros last night. You just flash your anti-COVID pass on your app and you get in, and there's no big issues. So the technology is there. As Michael just said, if you are vaccinated, there is no reason why free and easy movement should not be put in place as quickly as possible.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. We have a couple of questions on 261 for Ben and possibly also for Johan or any of the CEOs who want to weigh in. The question is, how likely are politicians to agree to the changes that we're advocating for, given the debate around refunds and the sensitivity of refunds during the crisis? And what specific reforms is A4E advocating for? So maybe, Ben, we can start with you on some of the reforms. What kind of reform are we asking for?
I'll repeat what I already said, which is we're looking for a more balanced approach to consumer protectionism and what fines are imposed on airlines, which today we find are actually the balance is not there. So this has been 8 years in the making to overhaul and reform this law. And I think this crisis has clearly shown that when you are as vulnerable as we are, we need to have things such as this not put additional burdens on us. And when events like mass refunds, mass cancellations get put in place, this law is not flexible enough to handle such events. So it just amplifies the fact that this law is not flexible enough. It does need to get reformed. It's been 8 years, and this is the time to do it.
And just to add to that as well, I mean, the absurdity of this whole thing is that because of the lack of what it stands for and what constitutes, for instance, an extraordinary delay as an example, that is now being left up for individual courts to try and to test. And you can see that those the outcomes of that is many cases going in the angle of the consumer, which was never the intent of what it did in the first place. It was there to protect the overall consumer landscape and then also look into what the industry should be liable for. So case by case, this is just actually eroding the whole of that regulation. So it needs to be reformed because those cases also set the precedents. Also, that was never the intention from the beginning. And I don't know if my colleagues would add to what I'm saying, but I think most people do recognize this when you speak to them. So now is to add what Ben said. Now is the time to really have a review of this.
Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you, Johan. Moving on to sustainability, there's a few questions for our CEOs. For Carsten, the question is: do you agree? For Michael, do you agree with Carsten that governments should somehow support funding for fleet renewal, as well as a move to sustainable fuels? This is from Chris Jasper at Bloomberg. Question from Michael.
Well, I think it's probably more something for Louis, who's dealing with the sustainability. Look, we've all signed up to very aggressive, very ambitious environmental targets, both for 2030 and for 2050. we do need government support, particularly, I mean, the big challenge facing us as an industry is going to be the availability of sustainable aviation fuels. You know, we would all want to use them now, but there's almost practically no supply of sustainable aviation fuels. We're all working hard and investing in that to deliver those, hopefully by 2030. In Ryanair, we're investing $20 billion in new technology aircraft. We take delivery of those over the next 4 or 5 years. These aircraft will carry 4% more passengers, but burn 16% less fuel, reduce noise emissions by 40%. So we are all investing heavily in new technology. I would clearly disagree with maybe Carsten and others as to whether we should do that from our own resources or whether we should receive government support. But there's no doubt in my mind, I think we're all in agreement that the government can and should do more, particularly in the area of delivering research on sustainable aviation fuel and increasing the availability of sustainable aviation fuels. And maybe Luis might want to come in and add to that, or Carsten.
Yes, I agree, Michael. I think all of us, we are investing in new technology. That is the best thing we can do in the short term. But also, we need the help from the different governments to have enough sustainable aviation fuel, and also to have the sustainable aviation fuel at the right price, because otherwise it's going to be impossible to arrive to the commitments that we have. Also, one important thing that we can do in the short term, and we have discussed a lot of times about this, is to advance in the single European sky. Is something that can reduce the CO2 emissions in the short term until we have another long-term solution that I am sure that the new technology for the aircraft will arrive. But I think we need to pass these next 15, 20 years with the technology that we have right now in front of us.
Okay, thanks very much, Luis. The next question is from Andreas Schultz for Thomas. Or for all, but I think Thomas might be best to answer it. It says, huge decarbonization costs are imposed on airlines by the EU easily, but SAS reforms are by far out of reach. Any chance that the EU will finally move, Thomas, this time around?
Yes, thank you for the question. And I like your specification on this time around. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are very disappointed in the way this is going, as I think was clear from my intervention, and particularly with regards to the Council, the Member States. You may recall that only months ago, when the Commission's proposal was launched last September, everyone is really excited, including the Member States, and the ANSP says, yes, this is the way to go, including for environmental reasons. So they themselves have, in principle, always admitted this is very important to bring CO2 emissions down between 6 and 10% as a minimum. And now you see when you are starting discussing, things that may be interpreted as sovereignty issues, when you go into the nitty-gritty of institutional affairs, all of a sudden they block. And the challenge that we see, or the problems that we see, is that it's not always probably the right people at the table of the Council who need to decide on this, and actually who know the impact of them delaying the process. So the whole situation is still very frustrating, I think, not only for us, but also for the European Commission, who we fully support on what they've been trying to do for the last decades, but also with this proposal. Yes, I think really governments should put the money where their mouth is, so to speak. They need to walk the talk. When they say single European sky, they admit to the principle that it's good to reduce CO2 emissions, and that's what people want. Why don't they support it now, when they actually can take a decision and can actually make a difference? So there's a lot of politics in the play, and I think it's very hypocrite from the member states, certainly some member states taking the lead here in the pack, to block things for political reasons. I think it's totally unacceptable.
Thanks, Thomas.
Can I just add that as well, just to get that in context? I think the estimates show, Thomas mentioned, that 6 and 10%, but the estimates show to clarify this could lead to reduction about 18 million tons less carbon emissions taking place. That's higher, more over and above what the ETS is doing at this moment in time. So, in the Destination 2050 roadmap, this has to happen, and this can happen now. This is all down to a decision that needs to be taken by the people who've been debating this now, as Thomas said, for decades now. I think 2013, but it's 18 million tons less of carbon emissions we would see if this was implemented.
Maybe just a quick one single fact to add to what Johan was saying, because we all know there's lots of doubts if these numbers are really achievable, if ATC really plays such a big role. We actually checked how much less fuel our aircraft needed for the same routes in this crisis, when basically the airspace was to be used in an optimized way compared to the times before the crisis. That's up to 16%. Our Paris-Frankfurt route, one of the most frequent routes we fly, we use 16% less fuel now with optimized flight levels, optimized approaches than what we did before. So the element that single or optimized air traffic control can play is huge.
Yeah. Thanks, Carsten. The next question is from Lawrence Frost at Reuters. Could some CEOs address the influence map report? This is the report by the UK think tank NGO from yesterday, and from today, and it's finding that airlines have lobbied against EU climate policies while publicly embracing net zero 2050. Thomas, do you want to have a go at this one? And then if maybe Carsten has something he wants to add. But first we'll start with Thomas.
Sure, thanks very much. I think we were sort of expecting that question. The report was published yesterday. And what you have also with this report, it's unfortunately is factually incorrect in many ways. To start with, but that's very important. That is the core issue here. I think it doesn't reflect the collective actions and investments made by European airlines to address climate change. I mean, it's not a new challenge. So that's one. But most probably more importantly for this report is it does mention Destination 2050, but it clearly hasn't read the report carefully. It doesn't really take into account that this is a very serious public report, roadmap to which all of our CEOs, I think this is very clear again today, have committed and remain committed before, during and after the crisis. And unfortunately, this report doesn't really take that into account in the different things it claims. I mean, European airlines themselves have set ambitious targets, which are in line with the Green Deal and the COP21, the so-called Paris Agreement. And I think it's been mentioned before. I think the witnesses here around the table with our CEOs is very clear that you are committed. We can't just say something publicly and launch a report in February. Since then, we've gone public. We've been having many conversations with the media, with Commission services, with all stakeholders. They've been extremely positive about this Destination 2050 report. And for those people who say, well, you can just publish something, no, this is serious. We've gone public on this. There's no way back because we do recognize that we need to increase our efforts. This is why we have the roadmap, and it's very clear, and it's in line with the Green Deal. So I think, to be honest, on the report is not really taking care of looking at all the facts. I think what I just wanted to add on that as well is that we've worked a year and a half on this report with all of the other stakeholders. As you probably know, it's with the NSPs, the airports, the OEMs and regional airlines, and A4E took the initiative. But this is an initiative, this roadmap, for the entire European aviation sector. We have been in contact with European Commission services as we went through this report, as we were constructing this report. And I can tell you that all Commission services, all the Commission people you talk to, were really pleasantly surprised that we actually have taken such a serious commitment. So the Commission, Parliament, Council, you name it, all institutions are very much impressed to what we have done, proposed as a roadmap, and to what we are committing to. I think, what else do you want? I mean, we are now at the stage of further implementing the roadmap, and this is what a lot of discussion for us is now about, is how we're going to make this happen. Not about, we lobbied against X, Y, Z. No, I think we've worked extremely closely with the policymakers since, as A4E, the last couple of years, because we take it very seriously. And I think it's just to close on that a report like that, picks up a few emails, a few reports, but doesn't really put things into context. So I'm I'm a bit disappointed to what this report has to say, but I'm sure some of the other CEOs can maybe add to that as well if they wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think we should give this report too much time or credibility. I mean, you find more factual accuracy in the children's comic than appeared in this rubbish yesterday. I mean, the central point of this so-called research is that the aviation sector has emerged one of the strongest opponents of climate policy. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, if you take the 5 members, the founder members of A4E, so we're investing something of the order, I think at last count, it's about 40 or 50 billion dollars in new technology aircraft for delivery over the next decade to significantly and substantially reduce our fuel consumption, our CO2 emissions, and our noise emissions. I can think of no other industry that is investing as much money in new technology to deliver, not just to deliver, but actually to exceed Europe's climate goals. Now, what we are opposed to, and I brook no criticism for this, we're opposed to the policy of certain European governments levying taxes under the guise of being some sort of environmental taxes, which they then trouser the money, they penalise our consumers, they trouser the money and don't spend it on the environment. There's no money being put into providing sustainable aviation fuels. In 2019, pre-COVID, Ryanair paid 630 million euros in environmental taxes. Not €1 of that was spent on the environment. So all of the members of A4E are hugely supportive. In fact, we're so supportive of the of Europe's climate goals that we're going ahead. We're running faster by 2030 than Europe actually wants us to run. But we are, and I think I speak for everybody, we are fundamentally opposed to single taxation, double taxation, and triple taxation under APD, ETS, and CORSIA of our consumers, our customers. And it is our job to fight on behalf of our customers so that governments don't just tax them using the charade of the environment and then trouser the money.
Anyone else have anything else to add? I think we covered this one. Well, pivoting a bit, there's a question from Reuters about your court cases on state aid. And the question is for Carsten, whether the success now with Condor, KLM, and TAP has you worried. So a question about state aid during the crisis for Carsten.
Is that for me or for Carsten?
For Carsten, but Michael, of course, feel free if you want to start.
But Michael, you and I fully agree on this, so I can speak on behalf of both of us. Now, every case is different. I think we all know that. And let's be honest, everybody, including everybody in this group, has received some kind of government support. Sometimes loans, sometimes equity, sometimes on those conditions, sometimes on that. So I think the individual case needs to be tested. I think that's fair to say. In an environment like Europe, that's done. My major concern as Lufthansa, I'm not competing just with those in this round. I'm competing with those outside of Europe, which has much less strict regimes of government support. So I'm fighting the large American carriers who have received billions, not like us to be paid back, but to be kept. The Chinese, the people and partners and competitors of us in the Bosporus or Gulf region, there have been billions of money flowing towards those who don't have to pay that back. And that, of course, is distorting indeed our system in a very aggressive way. That's my major concern. If there's anything Michael and I wouldn't agree on, he would add to it now. Go ahead, Michael.
I think the purpose of A4E is to campaign for those subjects on which we all agree. We don't all agree, or we don't all have share the same view on state aid, and so really, I think we should focus this press conference and today's agenda on those areas where we do agree, and not get into the kind of individual views on state aid.
Well said, Michael. Thanks. The next question is from Andrew Charlton on ATM. So on your point about the ANSPs passing on billions to airlines. Johan talked again about ATM issues. What are you going to do apart from complain? Is there an action plan, Johan?
Yeah, we are definitely, I'm speaking for easyJet, and I don't know, I think my colleagues on the panel here would be sympathetic. We're going to legally try this because this is actually a abuse of a, dominant position, a monopoly position, where they're basically using a framework that was never intended to be done in this way. And as we're going through and we're taking such a big hit, all of us that are on this panel, that actually is a massive undertaking just to come through. Never mind also to do the relevant and the necessary investments where we talk about sustainability, to then just basically say, you know what, you're going to need to compensate us for losses that we've had in 2021. That would be equivalent that we would go to the government and say, well, you got to compensate us for basically just giving us grants for the revenues we haven't got. And at the same time also that this is also an inefficient institutions in many cases. It needs reformation, and we talked about that. So we are definitely going to challenge this. This was never the intent, and we believe that they're abusing a market position of the monopoly that they're having, which can't stand any type of normal scrutiny, I believe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Johan. The next question, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. It says the US and the UK stand on the road on restarting transatlantic travel with a task force. By the way, something A4E called for a long time ago. Do you see that as a setback or a means to coordinate with the EU? Johan or any of the CEOs want to take this one?
Okay, I can take the one if you want. Okay, I think we have an opportunity now with the G7 to try to set the path to recovery. And I think North Atlantic is a traffic that, from my point of view, must be open. I think when you look at the numbers that we have the vaccination rate in UK and US and in Europe and US, it doesn't make any sense to have this corridor closed. So I think to have this task force, if what we are going to be is more ambitious, okay, that's what we want. But in some way, we need to be brave and to take decisions now, because I think the circumstances are there to open this important market. And every day we are, for example, from UK, every day we are not flying. UK businesses are losing around 23 million pounds every day. That doesn't make any sense. So I think we have an opportunity, and I hope we are going to take the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Luis. A question from Tanguy at the AFP. For all speakers, if possible, how do summer bookings look so far, and will they be enough to get you back in the black early this year? So a question about the outlook for summer bookings. Ben, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. No, we're optimistic, especially what we've seen in the last few weeks. Obviously, we're when we see what's going on in the domestic US market, that's very positive. What we've been seeing for many months now in domestic China, that you can freely move about. The demand is very strong, and we've seen that here in Europe, that when you do have the capability to move, that our customers, our clients, people, they want to go see their families, they want to go on vacation. So that's very, very encouraging. It's coming out extremely strong, and we're seeing that in our bookings.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? We have maybe 2 minutes left this summer. Otherwise, thank you to all our CEOs. Thank you to our journalists for tuning in. And our summit is about to begin in just about 2 minutes. So with that, you can stay on this channel. You don't have to